Okay, coming to the next question. How did the land reforms in some parts of the country help to improve the socio-economic conditions of the small and marginal farmers? Okay, Nayan is asking as to, does defense comes under the revenue budget? See, even for defense also, we undertake two types of expenditure: maintenance of defense and capital acquisition for defense, right? So even for defense also, when the government is buying new defense weapons, so that will be part of the capital expenditure. But for maintenance of defense, that is salaries and pensions to the defense officials, that will be part of the revenue expenditure. Clear, Nayan? Okay. Now look at the question. This question is how land reforms have helped to improve the socio-economic conditions of the small and marginal farmers. Now there are two things here. One, land reforms in certain parts of the country and how it has improved the socio-economic conditions of small and marginal farmers. This question is not about the land reforms. This question is not about the problems faced by the small and marginal farmers. This question is about how land reforms, successful land reforms in certain parts of the country, have benefited the small and marginal farmers. So you have to link these two things. That is how you can write an answer. This question was asked because it is directly related to syllabus of land reforms in India. And as you can see in Mains 2016, we had the question related to the land reforms, and repeatedly questions have been asked with respect to land reforms. So let's discuss the points which you could have incorporated in the answer to this particular question. But before this, let me give you the background. I hope most of you would have studied in the Indian history about different types of revenue settlement systems introduced by the British, right? So British had introduced different types of revenue settlement systems, such as the permanent system, zamindari system, roytwari system, mahalwari system, and so on. These revenue settlement systems were considered to be highly exploitative in nature, because this led to the concentration of land in the hands of only few people, that is the zamindars. A large number of intermediaries came into being. There used to be a forced eviction of the farmers. The rent which was collected from the farmers was very, very high. So to address all of these problems faced by the farmers, after India gained independence, we started implementing the land reforms in India. See, when we adopted Indian Constitution, we adopted DPSPs, Directive Principles of State Policy. And I hope in the DPSPs, you must have come across Article 39B and Article 39C, right? What does Article 39B and Article 39C deal with? It deals with prevention of concentration of wealth. It provides for equitable distribution of wealth. Now, can I say here, can I say that land is an economic and social asset? Land is an economic and social asset. If people have access to land, this will help them in their upward mobility, both in social status as well as the economic mobility, right? So land is a very critical social and economic asset. But when India gained independence, land was concentrated in the hands of only few people. So to address the historical injustices, to promote equity in land ownership, we started implementing the land reforms in India. What were the land reforms? So broadly, the land reforms focus upon, you can see here the components. I hope you are able to see this. So broadly, the land reforms focus upon abolition of the zamindari system. So we abolished the zamindari system. We abolished the intermediaries. We came up with the land ceiling acts. So land as a subject, as you know, it is under the state list. So different states implemented the Land Ceiling Act. Under the Land Ceiling Act, different states put a limit on how much of agricultural land can be owned by an individual or a household. For example, let's say in a particular state, with respect to irrigated area, a state has put a limit that no individual can own more than 10 acres of irrigated agriculture land. So we put a ceiling. Whatever was a surplus land with the ownership of the person. So let's say the person had 15 acres of land. That additional 5 acres of land was taken away from him, and then it was distributed among the poor and marginal farmers, landless people. Then we also started implementing the tenancy reforms. Now, what is tenancy? Tenancy basically means that if a person wants to cultivate an agricultural land, he can lease in the agricultural land from someone else who has the ownership of the land. And for leasing in the agricultural land, this person will be required to pay the rent. Now, as I said, tenancy is land is a subject under state list. So different states have adopted different tenancy laws. Some states have completely abolished tenancy. Some states have legalized tenancy. Some states allow the agricultural land to be leased out. So different states have adopted tenancy laws. And some states, in whichever states they have legalized tenancy, they have also provided for regulation of rent as to how much rent can you collect from the farmers. And then states have also focused upon organizing the farmers into cooperatives. So broadly, these are the reforms. But you must understand here, the demand of the question is not about explaining the land reforms. The demand of the question is about how these land reforms have benefited the small and marginal farmers. So in case if you have read about the land reforms and if you are explaining these land reforms in your answer, you're not going to get the points. You have to explain as to how these land reforms have benefited the small and marginal farmers. For that, you need to understand as to what are the problems faced by the small and marginal farmers, right? So can you see this circle here? Vicious cycle of land ownership and socio-economic status of small and marginal farmers, right? Can you see this? So here, as far as small and marginal farmers are concerned, as I keep repeatedly emphasizing, 86% of the farmers in India are small and marginal farmers. These farmers together own 48% of agricultural land. And these small and marginal farmers have come into a vicious cycle of poverty because of the land. For example, these small and marginal farmers, the land holding is very fragmented. Because of the fragmented land holding and because of the absence of land records, these small and marginal farmers do not have access to credit. If they don't have access to credit, they'll not be able to undertake investment in agriculture. The overall productivity of fragmented land holdings is lower. Marketable surplus is lower. So when they go to sell the agriculture produce in the market, they will be exploited by the traders, the small and marginal farmers. They will not get the MSP. And this in turn is leading to the low socio-economic status. So this is the vicious cycle. So what you have to explain is, this is the main part. This is the main part. You have to explain as to how these land reforms have enabled the small and marginal farmers to come out of this vicious cycle. Are you getting this point? So what are the points? See, first and foremost, you can write general points such as abolition of intermediaries, land ceiling acts, abolition of zamindari system. All of these have promoted equity in land ownership. It has addressed the historical injustices. So those points you could incorporate. Apart from that, you could also make a mention of voluntary movements such as Bhudan, Gramdan, etc. I hope most of you must have heard about Bhudan, Gramdan, which were started by Acharya Vinoba Bhave as part of voluntary land reforms movements. So you could have incorporated these voluntary land reform movements such as Bhudan and Gramdan. But your answer would be incomplete. Your answer would be incomplete unless you focus upon the tenancy reforms. So here, while writing the answer, the question itself says that land reforms in certain parts of the country have benefited small and marginal farmers, right? So you have to mention as to in which part of India, in which states land reforms have been successful. Where all they have been successful? They have been successful in Kerala and West Bengal. In West Bengal, the land reforms just started was Operation Barga. So this was a value enrichment point, Operation Barga. Apart from that, as I said, with respect to tenancy, some states have either abolished tenancy and some states have regulated the tenancy. They have legalized tenancy. And in whichever states tenancy has been legalized, it has immensely benefited the small and marginal farmers. That is why I say the most important point in the answer would be with respect to tenancy reforms. Question is, which states have legalized tenancy in agriculture land? These include states such as Tamil Nadu, West Bengal, and Andhra Pradesh. They have completely legalized tenancy. Now, some of you must be wondering as to how legalization of tenancy in agriculture land would benefit the small and marginal farmers, right? So let's understand. So we'll understand as to how legalization of tenancy in agriculture land will enable the small and marginal farmers to come out of this vicious cycle. Okay. Can you see this flowchart, all of you? Can you see this flowchart? This flowchart highlights the benefits of legalizing tenancy in the agricultural land. Now let's say there is a farmer A. This farmer is cultivating 1 hectare of agricultural land. And let's say this farmer is also cultivating 1 hectare of agricultural land. Let's say this farmer A, he is not interested in continuing with the agriculture sector because he believes that because he is owning less amount of agriculture land, the productivity is lower, he is facing losses. So this farmer A may want to migrate to urban areas in search of better employment opportunities. On the other hand, this farmer B wants to continue to work in the agriculture sector. So we have farmer A who wants to leave agriculture sector, and you have farmer B who wants to continue in the agriculture sector. So we have to bring them together, right? How do we bring them together? By legalizing tenancy in the agricultural land. When we legalize tenancy in the agricultural land, this farmer A will be able to lease his agricultural land to farmer B in a form of a written contract. And when this happens, it's win-win-win situation. Farmer A will get benefited, farmer B will get benefited, and more importantly, the Indian economy will get benefited. How? Look at farmer A. Can I say by leasing out the agricultural land, the farmer A can migrate to urban areas and get better employment opportunities? Yes. Will it not help him improve socioeconomic status? Yes. Second, this farmer will be able to earn rent on agricultural land. Look at farmer B. Farmer B was earlier cultivating only 1 hectare, but now he'll cultivate 2 hectares of agricultural land. So he'll have much higher area of agricultural land. This leasing in the form of a written contract, this written contract can be used by the farmer B to take loans from the banks and increase the investment. There is a written contract. This written contract will regulate the rent to be paid by the farmer B. So there will be no exploitation. This written contract will also provide that this leasing will be say for 10 years, for 15 years. So this farmer B has security of tenure. He knows for how long he is going to cultivate the agricultural land. So there is no exploitation for the farmer B. Are you getting this? How the economy is going to get benefited? First, one of the most biggest problem of the Indian agriculture is fragmented land holdings. We know that land holdings, when they are fragmented, the small and marginal farmers, they do not have access to inputs such as credit, seeds, fertilizers. The productivity is lower. They get less prices when they sell the produce in the market. Don't you think here by legalizing tenancy, we are consolidating the land holdings? Second, don't you think we are able to reduce the disguised unemployment? Look at farmer A. Farmer A is migrating to urban areas. We are able to reduce the disguised unemployment. Don't you think we are able to promote equity? Next, we are able to promote occupational mobility. People can switch from agriculture to other sectors which are more productive. It will also help us boost the agricultural productivity. So, if you see, only few states have legalized tenancy. These states include West Bengal, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, etc. And in these states, the small and marginal farmers have got immensely benefited because of the tenancy reforms. Are we clear now? Now, don't you think here we will be able to solve this problem? Yes, the vicious cycle by legalizing tenancy. So this is what you have to highlight. So by legalizing tenancy, we would be able to consolidate the land holdings, reduce disguised unemployment, promote occupational mobility, higher productivity, and so on. One of you was asking me in the chat box as to how it is going to promote equity. Okay, just focus here. The example which I gave here is that this farmer B is owning 1 hectare of agriculture land. Now let's say this farmer B is a landless agricultural worker. This landless agriculture worker can lease in the agricultural land. So this will in turn promote equity because this farmer will now have access to land which earlier was not there, right? So tenancy reforms is the most important point which you must compulsorily incorporate in the answers. If you just write about these things, the answer will not be complete. Your answer will be complete when you highlight about the tenancy reforms. And then cooperative farming. See, the current affairs class, we have discussed about FPOs, farmer producer organizations, how organizing the small and marginal farmers would benefit the overall the farming community. So here, when we organize the farmers into cooperatives, we will be able to reduce the input costs, enhance the productivity, and enable the farmers to get higher prices. This is what we discussed in the current affairs classes on the FPOs. So in some of the states, the cooperative farming has been highly successful. There are 2 important models which you must incorporate in your answer. One is Kudumshri model in Kerala, and the other one is in Andhra Pradesh, and it is known as Andhra Pradesh Mahila Samata Society, APMSS. So this is the Andhra Pradesh Mahila Samata Society, another successful model of the cooperative farming. And then digitization of land records, because absence of land records is in turn preventing the small and marginal farmers from having access to credit. So we need to digitize the land records. And this point also you could have incorporated because it is also part of the land reforms. Hindu Succession Amendment Act 2005. So as per the Hindu Succession Amendment Act, even the daughters would have equal rights as sons to inherit the agricultural land in India. Why is this important? In the recent years, there has been a greater feminization of Indian agriculture. More number of women are now taking up agriculture in the rural areas. The reason being, in the rural areas, the males are migrating to urban areas in search of better employment opportunities, which is in turn forcing the women to take up agriculture. And if women do not have access to land ownership, they will not be able to cultivate the agricultural land efficiently. So by giving them the ownership of the agricultural land, we can promote gender empowerment, women empowerment. Okay. So as far as way forward is concerned, see, one thing you must understand here, the question is very straightforward. The question is how the land reforms have benefited the small and marginal farmers. So the question is on benefit. The question is not asking you to critically analyze. You have to highlight the benefits. The question is not asking you as to what extent it has benefited the small and marginal farmers. If the question was to what extent it has benefited small and marginal farmers, probably then you would have written in detail about the problems with respect to land reforms. But this question is not asking you about that. This question is asking you about the benefits of the land reforms in the small and marginal farmers. So in order to make your answer more complete, very briefly, you could have touched upon that land reforms is an unfinished agenda. land reforms is a continuing process. Even today, land reforms in certain parts of India have failed because of political will, because of loopholes in the land ceiling acts, because of benami transactions. And one thing which you could conclude in the answer is, you must have heard about socio-economic caste census, SCCC. According to socio-economic caste census, even today, 56% of the rural households do not own agricultural land, which means even today there is huge inequity in terms of ownership of the agricultural land. So we need to focus on what? We need to focus upon land reforms 2.0. As part of land reforms 2.0, we must focus upon these people. What can be done here? We have to focus upon transferring the surplus government land to the people, legalizing tenancy in agricultural land, promoting farmer producer organizations. So all of these way forward points could have been incorporated in your conclusion. Are we clear now, all of you, with respect to these things? The question is, how will you structure this content in the answer in terms of introduction, body, and conclusion? The challenge is to write all of this in 150 words. Let's understand that. I'll show you as to how it can be written in 150 words. Okay. Look at the suggested answer. Suggested answer in terms of introduction is, in the introduction, you can highlight about poor socio-economic conditions of the small and marginal farmers. So right away, start with the poor socio-economic conditions of the small and marginal farmers. And then in the body of the answer, highlight as to how land reforms have benefited or improved these socio-economic conditions of small and marginal farmers. That's it. So here, your main emphasis should be on improvement part. This is the main part. This is the primary dimension. And after writing all the primary dimensions, very briefly touch upon this. Now, if the question was how and to what extent land reforms in certain parts of India have benefited small and marginal farmers, if question was that, then probably this also was a primary dimension and this also was a primary dimension. Are you getting this? The question is not asking you that. The question is asking you the benefits. So your primary dimension will be this, but briefly touch upon this. And the conclusion is that we need to focus upon land reforms 2.0. How you could have enriched your answer? One example of successful land reforms in certain parts, Kerala, West Bengal, Operation Barga. You could incorporate the diagram which I had shown to you about the vicious cycle of land ownership and poor socio-economic status of small and marginal farmers, and data related to small and marginal farmers in India. Are we clear now? So don't you think there's a flow here? You're first starting with the problems or the low socio-economic status of small and marginal farmers, and then you're highlighting as to how land reforms have improved or addressed the poor socio-economic status. Okay. So here, if you see the answer, can you see the introduction, all of you? The introduction says, Indian agriculture is dominated by small and marginal farmers, accounting for 48% of the agricultural land. These farmers are caught in a vicious trap due to the fragmented land holdings. So this is a diagram. Vicious cycle of land ownership and socio-economic status. And then in the body of the answer, successful land reforms in states such as Kerala, West Bengal have improved the socio-economic conditions of marginal and small farmers. So 5 to 6 points. 5 to 6 points here. And then land reforms have not been very successful because of 2 to 3 reasons. And then the conclusion. Are we clear on this? Okay, let's move to the last question for the day now. The question is, okay, as far as the discussion of this topic is concerned, this topic I had covered in detail in the mains revision classes. I hope you can see the screenshot here. In the mains revision classes, I had discussed as to why we need to legalize tenancy, how tenancy in agricultural land will benefit all the farmers. So this concept I had discussed in the mains revision classes.